I just want to thank and welcome everyone to this Community Investment Fund Round 3. There were some really great projects in both rounds 1 and 2, and I'm just so excited to see what more we can do with CIF around our state. And again, I think that the main point of this over the next several years of this program is it will be responsible for providing an incredible amount of opportunities for Connecticut cities and towns to revitalize the economic base and chart a path of equitable growth. And each one of these projects supports this goal. I know I speak for the Commissioner Dom. She couldn't make it, but she's glad to see that we were able to get those approved in round 2. So again, I'll kick it off back to Matt and the team, but we're just excited to see what's going to come in next.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob. We appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining this morning. So we are going to go over the Community Investment Fund application process. I'm joined today, besides our Deputy Commissioner, also Melinda Wilson, Assistant Director for the Community Investment Fund. We will be doing a Q&A at the end, so please submit your questions through the Q&A module, but please just wait a little while until we get going, as we'll probably answer many of your questions during the presentation. Heads up that the webinar is being recorded at the very start. We'll post both of the webinars that we do, this one and the one next week, onto the application page that you'll be able to access and review. So I just want to kind of outline the program really quickly for anybody that's new. This is a 5-year program with up to $175 million each year to be awarded. There will be 2 rounds of application each year. This is the 3rd round. So including this round here, we have 8 rounds remaining. Round 4 will open in October. And, really for all of our grant writers and economic development directors and leaders that are, dealing with that level of grant fatigue and planning, this is kind of the timeline moving forward. So roughly beginning of May to the end of June, and October to the end of December are roughly the 2 application periods. So you can kind of build that into your grant calendar and not wonder when we are going to be issuing the next round in the future. So I realize that many attendees today might be familiar with the process for application and review now that we've gone through this, but we do have many new communities and organizations here as well. And so we're going to walk through the eligibility for the program, the project categories, statutory priorities, and the application process. And we'll share what's different about the application process since round 2. We're going to highlight some common errors or challenges that DECD has observed through the first rounds and other lessons learned. And again, we know you have lots of questions. Please use the Q&A function. We will answer as many as we can, broadly. If you have specific questions on your project, please feel free to submit those via the Q&A. We will use those to update the FAQ document that's posted on the CIF website. You can also send questions to communityinvestmentfund@ct.gov. And again, this is a great opportunity if you have specific questions to schedule a one-on-one with the CIF team to talk those through. So DECD, we serve as the administrator of the Community Investment Fund program. And the Community Investment Fund is led by the Board of Directors, which will be making the decision on which grants to recommend to the governor for funding. So we and the CIF team at DECD are here to help you put your best foot forward in your application. So we just want to provide an overview on round 2 for everybody, and really to show you how highly competitive this process is. And so on the left here in the white, that's what the round 2 application pool looked like. So 196 total applications, 189 were eligible. So, it was really great. There were many fewer ineligible applications, but over $1 billion was requested. So more requested for just round 2 than we have available for the entire 5-year period. And 41 of the 55 eligible municipalities were represented here in this round. And you can see here then in the graphic $99 million in state funding awarded to 28 projects across 20 different municipalities. And we encourage you to visit the website and you can read the funded project descriptions. And so we're looking roughly at a 15% of projects funded through the first 2 rounds. And it doesn't mean when you read these project descriptions that these are the only types of projects that are going to be funded. But we do think it helps you get a sense of what has resonated and emerged as competitive applications. So across both rounds, 22 of the awarded projects have been to municipal applications, and 32 of the awarded projects have been to nonprofit and community development corporation applications. And 31% of the total awards through these first 2 rounds have been partial awards. The largest award has been $12 million, and the smallest award was a partial award for $155,000 for the planning component of the project. So now we can get into the program details. So just an overview of eligibility. This has not changed. So there are 3 categories of eligible applicants. They are the 55 municipalities that are designated as alliance districts or public investment communities. It does not matter if your community is on this list because you're a public investment community, an alliance district, or both. That's how the municipal eligibility is determined. So if you don't see your town that you are representing colored here in blue on the map, your community is not eligible. So then for these 55 eligible communities, either the municipality itself, a nonprofit organization, or a community development corporation that operates within those municipalities are eligible to apply. Now, you can partner with a non-eligible municipality, with a private entity, with a other type of entity, a council of government, for example, or a university, state or private, but the lead applicant would need to be one of these 3 eligible types. And in terms of eligibility and other pieces, we kind of end the fiscal year here. I just want to remind everyone. So every July, the public investment community and alliance district lists are updated by the state. If your community drops off that list as we enter a new fiscal year, you will remain eligible for this current 5-year period of the program. But if a new community is added, they would gain eligibility for the remaining time. So then there are 2 eligible project types. Well, first, all eligible projects must either be an economic or a community development project that's located in these municipalities. And then the other piece is that all projects or grant and aid furthers the consistent, systematic, fair, just, and impartial treatment of all individuals, including individuals who have been underserved and marginalized and have been denied such treatment, such as Black, Latino, and Indigenous and Native American persons, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, and other persons of color, members of religious minorities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer persons, and other persons comprising the LGBTQ+ community, persons who live in rural areas, and persons otherwise adversely affected by persistent poverty or inequality. And in terms of these economic and community development projects, we'd like to stress that projects, we're looking for transformational projects, projects that have community involvement and input. And when we talk about transformational, when we boil that down, we're looking at new outcomes or increased outcomes at scale. And that's why we ask you about what your outcomes are going to be in your application. It's really the way to communicate the transformational impact that the project's going to have. Oh, sorry about that. So 2 project category areas that have stayed the same: capital improvements and small business support programs. So capital improvements, really it's a range of project types, including brownfield remediation, affordable housing, establishment of or improvements to water and sewer infrastructure to support smaller scale economic development, pedestrian safety and traffic calming improvements, establishment or improvements to energy resiliency or clean energy projects, And land acquisition and capital projects to construct, rehabilitate, or renovate buildings and structures to facilitate home rehabilitation programs and such facilities, or other public facilities such as libraries and senior centers. So those are the capital improvement project types. The small business support program. This is to develop a small business support program, such as a revolving loan program or a gap financing program. It is a loan program. It is not direct individual support for a small business. So if you're a small business here saying, I want a grant, this is not for you to apply to directly. This is for a town to apply and develop this type of program, or a community development corporation to apply. And the only grant program that can be provided is for startup funds to establish a small business, a new small business in one of the eligible municipalities. The new category is a planning grant. So the idea here, we've been able to fund planning in the first 2 rounds, and several planning grants were awarded. But here we're trying to make it a little bit more clear. The idea is that this planning work is going to be funding the community engagement process, feasibility studies, initial engineering, and conceptual architectural plans, so that you can develop a strong project plan, an accurate project budget, and then be able to come back and have a competitive project once this planning work is done in the capital project program. In the planning grant, you still want to talk about what the end result is that you're trying to get to, and what type of work that you're going to do. The minimum that we have for a project request is $250,000. There's no limit to the grant request. So minimum request of $250,000, no maximum. And on the small business program, we encourage you to make an appointment and talk this through with us, because it can be a little bit complicated in terms of operational expenses versus the types of eligible expenses for a small business support program. And again, as we are evaluating these, we are looking for small business support programs that are not duplicative of other small business lending programs that the state is already supporting, such as the Connecticut Small Business Boost program. So talking a little bit more about this new planning award category, again, the eligible activities here are detailed out, and it's really designed to have it be upfront in the process, not just funding the soft costs in terms of architectural and engineering and plan completion, but really making sure that this is a project that has community engagement and has the feasibility and sustainability analysis and planning put together, so that the project can come back in a future round and be more competitive. So really, this is designed for organizations and communities that do not have a lot of internal capacity to do this work themselves, and can take this ambitious project idea and move it forward. One thing before I move on that I want to stress here is, as we get into this next slide, is that planning grants do not need to meet the new minimum project budget. So we now have raised in round 3, the board made a change at our March meeting, and we've raised the minimum project budget to $1.5 million. So that's the whole total project budget. The minimum CIF grant request can still be $250,000, but we're looking for a minimum project budget of 1.5. And really, this is not to remove projects from the list or from eligibility. It's to encourage applicants to think bigger about their project. And really, these are supposed to be new and increased outcomes at scale. So use this to challenge yourself and your project. So moving on, the Community Investment Fund legislation provides for statutory prioritization for applications, and specifically municipal applications receive priority if they have one of these three things, which is they have implemented local hiring preferences pursuant to 7-112 of the general statutes, that they have or will leverage municipal, private, philanthropic, or federal funds for such a project. So any non-state sources, that's, to say it more clearly, we are looking for non-state sources of funding as leverage. And the application includes a letter of support from one or more members of the General Assembly in whose district the project will be located. Now, nonprofit and community development corporations can also receive prioritization if the application includes a project labor agreement or other employment proposal to employ ex-offenders or individuals with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities. And municipal projects also are eligible for this fourth piece of prioritization. So then in our review at DECD, we prepare an executive summary of each application and provide this executive summary as well as the full application materials to the Community Investment Fund Board. And so besides making sure that it's eligible and that it has, indicating which of these prioritizations it has, DECD also works to review alignment of the project with the Connecticut's Economic Action Plan, and also DECD best practices. So when we're looking at best practices, we're looking at what represents an efficient use of taxpayer funds. And so that means projects that are shovel ready, projects that are leveraging funding, a realistic and comprehensive budget, limiting soft costs, and a realistic and comprehensive project plan. So let me just get into those a little bit more one at a time. So when projects are shovel ready, we're looking for design and documents at 40% completion. We're looking for zoning approvals. We are looking for site control. Those are the types of things that we are looking for in terms of shovel ready. In terms of a realistic and comprehensive project plan, for new and expanded facilities, we're looking for a pro forma budget showing operating capacity that you're going to be able to continue to afford to operate this facility, not at a loss moving forward. We don't want, it's not an efficient use of taxpayer funds if we renovate and expand or build a new facility and it's not open in 2 or 3 years. In terms of leveraging funding, so again, this is any project, municipal or nonprofit, that is leveraging non-state funds. You're going to receive, that checkbox in terms of leveraging funding. Now, it's not required, but that's what we're doing in terms of DECD evaluation. We're also, and we'll get into this on the next couple of slides in a little bit more detail, we're also looking at potential issues in terms of State Historic Preservation Office review. If the project is going to be subject to that, that could impact the timeline and the budget of a project. And same with the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, that could impact timeline. It could impact cost, it could impact scope of the project. So those are also things that we'll be looking at. For limiting soft costs, the bar that we use is 15% on these projects. So if your soft costs are at 15% or lower, then we will say that the project is limiting soft costs. If it is higher, then it will not. Now, again, under the terms of the grant program, soft costs are allowable for this program, which is different than other DECD programs, but we're still being asked to evaluate this and highlight that as a strength of the project. On the small business support program, the legislation requires the board to look at certain factors, including the risk of default payment on proposed loans and financing, the impact on job creation and retention, the impact on blighted communities, and the overall impact on the community. And DECD assesses proposals to make sure that they align with small business financing best practices. There we go. So now moving into a couple of areas that we really just wanted to add. We've mentioned this in the past webinars, but really want to stress this as there's been some confusion as we go through both rounds. So Connecticut Connecticut Environmental Policy Act. The core purpose of SEPA is to provide a public process for state agencies to identify and assess the extent to which their proposed actions may potentially affect the environment and to evaluate alternatives to avoid or minimize such impacts. So the two links here, and both of these will be posted on the website, go into more detail on the overview of the program, and this generic environmental classification document really shows what projects may require, or don't require a SEPA scoping process, which is this public engagement review process. So DECD, Community Investment Fund projects are subject to SEPA. SHPO, or the State Historic Preservation Office. SHPO administers a range of programs, tax credit programs, but they're responsible for protecting buildings, sites, structures, districts, and objects that compromise Connecticut's cultural heritage. And so your project, even if you're building on a vacant site, may be subject to SHPO review. Archaeological concerns, on a vacant site that has never been developed might be something that's unknown to you, but something that is known to SHPO. So we ask that if you have not already received a letter from SHPO for this project, to please complete and submit a project review cover form with your application to ensure that we have all of the information that is necessary to complete the review. There may be questions that SHPO has as they go through this. You do not need to have a SHPO determination letter in order to apply. However, depending, SHPO may need to do a more in-depth review or have comments after award. If you do have a SHPO determination letter, please include that with your application materials. We're not asking you to reapply with your application. And then the third area is we really want to emphasize that DECD grants and Community Investment Fund grants are subject to prevailing wage. The language that we have up here on the slide about assessing the applicability of prevailing wage is the language that we've had in our FAQ document. But in general, a public works project that's financed by the government for the benefit and use of the general public, and can be classified as building, heavy, highway, or residential, and applies to rehabilitation, refinishing, refurbishing, alteration, or repair where the total cost of the work performed is more than $100,000 or more than $1 million for new construction, may be subject to prevailing wage. And so we're asking everyone to make sure that you have a formal DOL determination of the applicability of prevailing wage rates for your project. And Mary Toner, wage enforcement agent with the Connecticut Department of Labor, is your best contact for that. We have her information here. It's also in the FAQ document that is posted on the application page. But to ensure that you have a realistic and comprehensive budget, you're going to need to have that formal determination in advance. Otherwise, this can and has for certain projects resulted in a budget gap and challenges to move forward. So there are a lot of different project types, and depending on where you are, you're going to have different supporting documents that you're going to be able to attach. Required attachments, though, for municipalities, please include your municipal certification to request funding, as well as the municipal certification of eligibility for discretionary state funding or the waiver request. All applicants, please include a State Historic Preservation Office project notification form or your determination letter, a community investment fund budget template that is really a sources and uses budget. And then please include your own separate detailed project budget. That could be in your own format. So now we'll go into the review process. So again, DECD is reviewing these. We are not making the decision on which projects are moving forward. So we prepare an executive summary during the review process that'll start the afternoon of June 30th. And we will determine applications eligibility. We will review all of the applications. We may be back to you with follow-up questions as capacity allows. And then by the beginning of August, we will provide eligible applications and executive summaries to the Community Investment Fund Board. They will review these, and then at their board meeting, the second Tuesday of September, we'll be making recommendations. The board's recommendations for round 3 will then be transmitted to the governor, who reviews these and issues his final recommendations to the State Bond Commission. So the State Bond Commission meeting needs to be held within 60 days of the governor receiving the board's recommendations. Once the State Bonding Commission approval is issued, that's when the project is awarded. So as anybody that has received something in round 1, you will hear from us after the September board meeting. You'll receive notice that you've been recommended for a project. And then once the State Bond Commission meeting is held, you'll receive notice that you've been awarded. And after the board meeting, we will provide a letter to all non-recommended projects stating that you've not been recommended in this round. And we will also include your executive summary, so you have that moving forward. So I think I jumped ahead a little bit and talked about the timeline a little in detail there, but the deadline for round 3 is Friday, June 30th at noon. So we will have all of the materials posted on Monday morning, May 1st on the website. The portal will be up, and then you have until Friday, June 30th. Board meetings is September 12th, and we will have information to you as quick as we can, because round 4 will be opening in October of 2023. You can resubmit projects in future rounds. You do not need to resubmit in the next round. This is not racing to get in line. This is about submitting your project when it is the strongest place that it is, and can be as competitive as possible. You can also have more than one application submitted in a single round. There can be more than one application from an entity within a municipality. And yes, that is all of that. So how to apply? So please review and read the notice of funding availability and the application instructions in detail. We have Word versions of the applications forms that are available for download on the website on Monday. You're going to request a SharePoint folder. The SharePoint folder is going to, will give you access for 2 people from your team. You're going to submit all of your application attachments through the SharePoint folder. You're going to enter in the application responses through the form or the portal on the website. So please do not put a Word version of your application into the SharePoint folder and think that you've submitted it. You need to submit through the portal. Please review the FAQ document that's posted on the website. There's a lot of good information there that is helpful, and it's a really great way to do some problem solving and some thinking. We do have the availability of one-on-one assistance, 30-minute sessions. And for any questions that you have, please email them to us in advance so that we could work to get you an answer as quick as possible. It's much better than scheduling a one-on-one and not telling us what you specifically want to talk about. It's better if we have that question in advance and can prepare on that. And again, please do not email applications or attachments to us. We need everything to come in through the SharePoint. Otherwise, it just becomes really unmanageable. Oh. So in terms of the reapplication process, so if you are coming back with an application from round 1 or round 2, this is a change. We tried to see if we could make a more abbreviated process for round 2, and we're making a change here. Everybody needs to submit through the portal. We really want to make sure that all projects are compared as, apples to apples as possible. And that was sometimes a challenge with the reapplication process. So please update your attachments if you are reapplying. Your budgets, your timelines, project details have changed. If you're coming back from round 1, it's been just about a year since you applied. Specifically, please update your letters of support from elected representatives, whether that's your for selectman or mayor, or from your Connecticut General Assembly representatives, because especially as their understanding of the program has evolved over the last year, we want to make sure that the letters of support are accurate and represent the projects that they are trying to support actively at this time. Please update your budgets and update your project timeline if you are reapplying, because otherwise it goes against you. It looks like your project timeline is off by months, and it really creates a lot of questions in the review process. So just, going back, some of these are lessons learned that we emphasized as we went into round 2. But, it's still some kind of the challenges that we see across applications on a regular basis. So we just kind of want to emphasize these. So underserved audience identification. This is one of the basic components of eligibility for the CIF program. And we're really asking for applicants to be intentional in their response. Stating that your municipality is a public investment community and that you're eligible is not enough of a thoughtful response for the underserved population that is going to benefit from a project. The other piece is intentionality of your process. So we ask a lot of questions around community engagement and what the process was for developing the project. And as one board member has said clearly over and over when speaking publicly about community investment fund, this is the community investment fund, not the city investment fund. So how is the community involved in this project? And so again, we're not looking for one sort of process that you have in terms of community engagement, but we're looking for you to be intentional. There's not a right or wrong answer here. There's different ways to be thoughtful. They do not need to be expensive or fancy processes in terms of or surveys. They can be, but we're looking for community-driven methods. And we're really trying to assess how the proposed project is going to have the intended impact, again, on that underserved population and the challenges that they are facing in your community. So transformative. Again, we say this a lot, and I think that's one of the most common questions we get. What do you mean by transformative? And very simple, it's new outcomes or increased outcomes at scale. So think about this when you talk about what your organization, your municipality is currently doing and what the project is doing and how you're going to define success. There is the success in building and completing the project, and that an initial success. And then there is also the results, the impacts and outcomes that come from that project being complete, either the activities that are conducted at that community center or the other kind of second and tertiary effects that can come out of it. Quantify your outcomes. If you're talking about we're going to serve more people, please help us understand, is more 10 or is more 1,000? Please quantify your outcomes. Programmatic expenses. Programmatic expenses are not covered. So a workforce training program, an after-school tutoring program, a childcare program, while these can have transformative impacts on the underserved population, programmatic expenses are not covered. So you can build an after-school childcare facility, but the operating expenses, additional staff, additional costs towards rent, towards utilities, those are not covered. And I think that is it. That covers everything that we wanted to cover here. Again, you can email questions to Community Investment Fund. You can schedule a one-on-one meeting, and you can type any questions into the chat. So Melinda,
Yeah,
do we
I've
have
left
questions?
I do. We've had an active chat conversation going on. We have more questions coming in. In regards to what you were just speaking about, Matt, about programmatic expenses not being covered by CIF, how does that apply in a planning grant, specifically around surveys, studies, or community engagement work?
So actually, that's a really great question. So I guess that is we're viewing planning grants as that all being soft cost. The community engagement, the surveys, the costs for that are eligible based on what we have, based on what the board has defined a planning grants eligible expenses and activities to be.
Another planning grant question. If environmental assessment is an aspect of the project, would that be covered under the CIF application, or would there have to be a separate brownfield application?
Sorry, can you say that one again?
If there's environmental assessment needed on the project, could that be included in the CIF request, or would assessment have to be done through brownfields?
That's a good question. And I will say we will get back to that, and we'll include that in the FAQ document. I just want to go back to the line by line eligible activities for the planning grant and see if that fits or if it would have to go to brownfields.
Okay. Can you address nonprofit organizations' letters of support in the relation to priorities given to municipalities?
Sure. So a nonprofit can include a letter of support from town leadership, mayor, first selectman. You can include a letter of support from your Connecticut General Assembly members, but the letter of support in terms of prioritization only applies to the municipal application. So what we do for a nonprofit organization that has a letter of support is that we will indicate the letter of support from any governmental leadership, any other stakeholder groups or partner organizations in the list of strengths that we identify in the executive summary. So it's still taken into consideration, but there's no prioritization given.
Okay, if a nonprofit has several locations that need infrastructure improvements, can a nonprofit submit one application to cover multiple locations?
It's hard to give a blanket yes or a blanket no to that. I think that is a conversation that would better be developed in a one-on-one conversation, because just kind of off the top of my head, I start to think about potential ways to say yes and potential ways to say no. And I think we want to understand the scope of the project, the locations of the project. And, really, I think that the biggest challenge and the way to start to think about it is there's a limitation to to the responses? And in the application, are you going to be able to talk about the scope of all of those locations when you're answering the questions, or are you going to be limited? And that starts to become, maybe the first way to approach it. But I think a one-on-one conversation is best.
Can you address phased projects in terms of future funding in future rounds?
So, sure. So you can break your project down, and as I indicated at the beginning, I think roughly 33% of projects through both rounds have received partial funding. So you can indicate the full scope of the project, but then it is really helpful to create the phases that are actionable, and the funding that lines up with that. So if you have a phase 1, 2, and 3, if we know that phase 2 is going to take you 2 years, 3 years to execute, or sorry, phase 1 is going to take 2 or 3 years to execute, and that's going to cost $5 million, it's good to know that there is the flexibility of providing funding for phase 1 so that you can start to move forward. And then a project can come back in a future round to request funding for phase 2 and phase 3. There is no guarantee that you're going to receive funding, but there's also no, it's not held against you that you've received prior funding. We are allowing that sort of flexibility. So again, when you're working on a project, it's better to say, this is the end result. This is what we're going for, phase 1, 2, and 3 as a whole, but to break it down and provide the avenue for partial funding. I hope that was clear.
Thanks, Matt. Can you summarize quickly expectations of shovel readiness?
Yes, I'll try to do it quickly. So shovel readiness, again, at the end of the day, I think the simplest is that you're ready to go and use funding after 6 months from the time that we close your grant agreement. And that is going to take some time after the State Bond Commission. So we're not looking for a project that is necessarily in progress right now, and you just need a little bit of money. We're looking for something that is ready to go. So site control, zoning approval, at least 40% construction document development, because it'll take about 6 months to get to 100% so that you can go to bid. Bid ready construction documents would be a great indication of shovel readiness. What else? A realistic budget that demonstrates that you've taken into account, based on your grant request and potential state funding, that there's going to be prevailing wage involved and your budget makes sense, that you have a operational sustainability plan for the project. Those are all things that we are looking at in terms of shovel readiness.
Great. Would prior significant state support for a project preclude an organization receiving funding from CIF?
It's something that's taken into account. So I would say that it doesn't preclude it. I don't have the exact percentage of projects that have been funded through the first 2 rounds that have received other state support. But again, what we're looking for is projects that are leveraging. I wouldn't say, sorry, I want to retract that. It's not what we're looking for. What we're trying to evaluate in terms of DECD best practices, and then also the municipal prioritization around leverage, is projects that are bringing non-state funds to the table. It doesn't mean that because you also have tax credits through SHPO or DOH, or you have another grant towards the project, that you're going to be precluded, but it is something that's going to be taken into account at the end of the day. If it's only state dollars and no other dollars that are going into the project, it will be taken into account.
Okay, we have a question regarding the executive summary and how the categories are weighted. Can you address the alignment? DECD does on the executive summary?
Sure. So I think that the simplest way to address it is that the categories aren't weighted. There's not points assigned. It's not like a rubric in that way where you get 5 points for this and 1 point for that. It is trying to make it for anybody that has seen it before. And, you know, I think we'll post a blank version of it on the website just for anybody that's applying for the first time. It's just indicating whether or not it's eligible, whether or not it has statutory prioritizations, and where it does align with those DECD best practices, and where it doesn't, and where it does align with the governor's economic action plan, and any strengths or weaknesses that we can see beyond that that are worth highlighting for the board.
Would it be a stronger construction application to first apply for a planning grant and then subsequently apply for the actual project?
It could be. I mean, it depends what happens during the planning process. I think that, yeah, it could be.
How many nonprofits were funded that did not have project labor agreements?
I do not have that specific number, but I could say that across the board, very few projects have had project labor agreements as a component of their application through both the first 2 rounds.
Can you address period of performance on CIF awards?
So Melinda's period of performance there, I'm interpreting that as referring to the grant period that they need to use the funds within.
That's what I would assume as well.
Okay, so that is going to be, there is no prescribed use of funds period for CIF as a program. So we're looking at this on a project by project basis, and that'll be set in the project timeline that you provide. And what you provide to us is what we will build into your grant contract. So we're looking at some projects that are going to be multi-phase and are going to take 5 years to get done, or potentially longer. And then we've funded some projects that, you know, really look more like 18-month to 2-year projects to complete.
Okay. Regarding sustainability, how far ahead should a nonprofit project?
5-year
How much detail?
Yeah, 5-year pro forma is what we're looking for.
Oh, can you please address, I'm sorry, I had a hard time understanding the question. Can you please address that the grants are reimbursement on a reimbursement basis?
Yes, the grants are provided on a reimbursement basis, which is consistent with other grants that you would receive from DECD. So you will show that you have expended funds for the eligible expenses, and then you'll be reimbursed. You're not going to receive a $2 million check upfront.
We have a question regarding, someone's jumping way ahead to bidding for professional services. What are some of those requirements?
So I think probably easiest thing to say is that bidding for professional services and bidding for construction services, you're going to have to follow DECD procurement guidelines for those. So it is not something where you're going to come in and say, I've already selected my my builder and we're ready to go and the contract's been signed.
If funding has been awarded in the prior round, but the project has not yet started, will that impact competitiveness of an application for this round? I think you've addressed that already, but maybe we need to.
Yeah, I do want to add on to that. So, because we have two different types of ways that we could look at that. So there were some projects that have been funded that are more for the pre-development or architectural and engineering work that needs to be done in a prior round. If the award was made in round one for that, and you come back in round three and you've not made any progress on that, that could reflect that could be kind of be potentially viewed as that you haven't made any progress on the project. However, if you received partial funding in round one or round two for the hard costs of a project, but for some reason you only received them on phase 1A, for example, and now you want them for phase 1B, that would not that would probably not be as much of a negative.
Okay. Can you go over the minimum project budget of 1.5 million again, Matt?
Sure. So the total project, the minimum total project budget, the sum of all expenses should be $1.5 million or higher. In that, your CIF request can be as low as $250,000. It could be as high as $1.5 million. So it's not the CIF request minimum is 1.5 million. It's the total project budget minimum is 1.5 million.
Can you address on the reimbursement aspect of CIF grants, how often someone can request reimbursement after being funded and working on a project?
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it ends up being on a capacity basis. There's not a prescribed period. That's something that we can develop. We can work to develop with you based on the needs of the project.
Okay.
And
you
the recipient.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, and the needs of the recipient.
Can you address CIF requirements on match or cost share?
There are no requirements for match or cost share per the authorizing statute. What we're looking for, or not what we're looking for, sorry. What we're assessing is for municipalities, you get prioritization if you're leveraging any amount of non-state funds. And for nonprofit and community development corporation applications, you're going to receive an indication that you have a strength, which is leveraging non-state funds towards the project. There's no recommended ratio proportion amount.
Okay. I think we have time for one more. Would an application for upgrades to a wastewater treatment facility be eligible, or should it be linked to another project that would create jobs or housing? Wastewater treatment facility. Upgrades to a wastewater treatment facility.
Yep. So happy to have a one-on-one to discuss, prioritizing applications from your community. Water and sewer infrastructure and upgrades based on the letter of the statute and the capital project type is eligible. I think, kind of using this as a closeout, one thing to think about is we have encountered is what other state of Connecticut grant programs are out there for different project types. And, again, we're trying to determine at the end of the day where community investment funds can be most impactful and where they represent the most efficient use of taxpayer dollars. And so that is also something that the board and the governor's office is taking into account as we look at the different types of applications that are eligible for CIF. There's oftentimes other programs through other departments within the state funding similar project types. So it's really best to make sure that you're aligning with those other grant programs and matching up the best project for the best opportunity, and do understand that we are communicating with different departments and agencies and trying to figure out from their perspective if the project fits for CIF or if it's a better fit for their program.
So we're up on our hour. There are many questions left in the chat that please be assured we will address. And there will be an updated FAQ document posted after the second webinar, which is next Tuesday.